Good afternoon. My name is Lieutenant Crawford. I'm with the Greenville Police Department, and I have been assigned to come here and answer your questions.
Do you know who was involved in this accident?
I do not have all the names of the people involved yet, but they are known.
I'm Melanie Colazos with Greenville Newspaper. Have any arrests been made?
At this time, we've made 2 arrests. We arrested Tristan Wooten, who was the driver of the Kia Forte. He's a Greenville Christian School student. And we arrested Dylan Coleman, the driver of the Ford Focus, and he is a Greenville High School student.
Jerry Dixon with GHS News. Do you know how fast the cars were traveling?
Our accident investigator is still on the scene and taking some measurements and things like that. But from what we can determine at this point, they were doing at least 55, maybe 60 miles an hour.
Casey Brown with Greenville Christian School. Have the next of kin of the deceased been notified?
We're working on all of our notifications right now, but I believe shortly before I arrived here that the last person was located and notified.
Abby Hooper with Greenville High School.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the cause of the accident was?
I believe that we've been able to determine the events leading up to the accident. It appears that 2 students from the Greenville Christian School and 1 student from the Greenville High School decided to cut classes today, and they were unfortunately drinking, and we believe taking some drugs, but that has yet to be determined. And they decided to race back to the school. So they were racing up Monty Stratton. They came around onto Lyons Lair and into the school parking lot. I don't believe they understood that there would be people in the parking lot, but nevertheless, that's what took place.
Allison Trindle with Line Direct. How are the schools handling this?
Well, as you can imagine, there's a lot of trauma that comes from something like this, both for the students that were injured and killed and for the ones that caused the accident. So I would imagine that there's going to need to be a lot of counseling, a lot of understanding that takes place over the next several months. Yes.
And Brianna Rodarte with Greenville Christian News. Have the classmates of those involved been notified?
I believe that most of the classmates know what has taken place, but there's going to be an assembly tomorrow for both schools to make sure that they're all aware.
Mm-hmm. Andy Henderson with GCS Rise Online. Do we know the extent of the injuries of the survivors?
That answer is rather involved because of the amount of people that were in the crash. So if you'll give me a minute to consult my notes, I'll see if I can make it clear. We had 2 people from the Greenville Christian School. They were in a Kia Forte. There was a driver and a passenger. The driver was Tristan Wooten, and the passenger is Jessica Evans. Unfortunately, Miss Evans was killed on the scene during the crash. Then we had 1 driver from the Greenville High School, and that was Dylan Coleman. Mr. Coleman did not suffer any injuries in the crash. There was a driver and a passenger leaving the high school. They were not involved in any wrongdoing, but unfortunately they were struck by the vehicle Dylan Coleman was driving. The driver suffered some rather traumatic injuries, traumatic head injuries, and they had to be flown to Dallas. Air evac transported them. The passenger had some serious injuries and had to be extricated from the vehicle. At this point, I do not know the extent of those injuries. I do know they were taken to Hunt Regional Medical Center. We also had 4 pedestrians that were crossing the parking lot at the time that the crash occurred. The Ford Focus struck 2 pedestrians as it raced through the parking lot. From what we can determine, One of the people, Giovanni Pimental, was able to push the other pedestrian out of the way, and that was Jada Hilburn. Jada fortunately only suffered minor injuries, though she still had to go to the hospital. Unfortunately, Giovanni was killed on impact with that vehicle. On the other vehicle, the Kia Forte, when it impacted the vehicle that was leaving the parking lot, the vehicle that was driven by Riley Cox, it knocked that vehicle backwards about 50 feet. The force of the impact was so great. And when that vehicle was knocked backwards, it struck two pedestrians. It was no fault of the driver of that vehicle, but unfortunately that's what happens when two vehicles meet at such a speed. So one suffered minor injuries from being struck by the vehicle as it went past, and that was Annie Stewart. Annie was also transported to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. The other pedestrian that was struck was Charlie Pickens. Miss Pickens was trapped under the rear of the vehicle and had to be extricated. And she was she was transported to the hospital where she later died from her injuries. I'm sorry. The passenger in Riley Cox's vehicle was trapped and had to be extricated by the fire department. That is Matthew Urbina, and he was transported to Hunt Regional Medical Center by AMR. We do believe that he will recover from his injuries. Yes.
Christian Bauer for GHS. Were the drivers impaired?
It is our belief that both drivers were impaired, both from the field sobriety test that was conducted on scene and from what they've told us that was taking place before the accident occurred. Because of this and because of fatalities, both drivers were taken to Hunt Regional Medical Center where blood was drawn. Now, as you can imagine, it takes a while for that to come back from the lab to confirm our suspicions. But at this point, both of those drivers are being charged with driving under the influence, with intoxication assault, and with intoxication manslaughter. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Brandon Safer, Eagle News. What were the ages of the victims?
All right, we have victims from 9th grade to 12th grade. So I would put the age range between 15 and 18. I don't have the specifics at this time. This is all the time that we have at this moment. As I get more news, then we will call another press conference later this evening. Thank you.